Alors, rebonjour, merci d'être là. Donc, nous allons entamer la deuxième session de cette journée d'études qui donc s'intitule Topographie des archives, espaces de pensée, d'écriture, de création, qui s'intéresse à la fois à l'espace tangible lié à l'emplacement physique et matériel des objets, des livres, des documents dans un ou plusieurs endroits, et aux fonctions évidemment de ces endroits, atelier, appartement, bureau, cuisine, et en même temps à ces espaces impalpables qui appartiennent à la spatialisation imaginaire de la personne qui travaille, propre, donc spatialisation propre à chaque auteur avec sa part arbitraire, irrationnelle, voire inconsciente. Alors, en complément aux communications de ce matin, nous allons avoir 4 interventions, donc regroupées par 2 avec un moment de discussion après, et puis ensuite une synthèse. Et sans plus tarder, je passe la parole à la modératrice de l'après-midi, donc Antje Kramer-Malordi, maître de conférence à l'université Rennes 2, et par ailleurs, depuis cette année aussi, directrice des archives de la critique d'art, donc à Rennes, spécialiste de l'art contemporain. Alors, j'ai pas le titre de ton livre en tête. Bon. Mais voilà. Non, tu peux le dire?
Oui. Voilà, donc oui, pour ma thèse, donc moi j'ai travaillé surtout sur le réseau allemand des nouveaux réalistes, donc, et qui était devenu donc un livre intitulé L'aventure allemande du nouveau réalisme, fantasmes européens, réalité et fantasmes d'une néo-avant-garde européenne. Voilà.
Et puis ensuite, Antje a dirigé, donc le thème des archives, c'est très proche, cher, puisque pendant plusieurs années, tu as dirigé un programme qui s'appelait Prisme et qui était consacré aux archives de ICA International. Voilà. Je te passe la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Donc justement, merci beaucoup Elisa, merci beaucoup aussi France et l'ensemble des collègues impliqués dans l'organisation de cette journée, précédée donc par un workshop hier consacré déjà aux archives et donc justement à toutes ces passerelles entre le travail archivistique et puis aussi toute son interprétation à faire. Donc on continue dans cette richesse des échanges pour l'après-midi. Donc j'ai le plaisir de présenter notre premier intervenant qui est Pietro Rigolo, qui nous vient ici du Getty Research Institute. Donc Pietro a poursuivi une thèse et donc consacrée à Harald Zeman, soutenue donc à l'Université de Sienne en 2011. Et a obtenu ensuite donc la poursuite de ses recherches, toujours consacrées à Zeman, à travers donc un travail déjà en tant qu'archiviste, jusqu'en 2018 au Getty Research Institute, avant de devenir donc assistant curator, donc commissaire assistant dans cette même institution. Et effectivement, ces recherches se concentrent essentiellement sur l'histoire des expositions et les pratiques curatoriales, en particulier donc depuis la seconde moitié du XXe siècle. Et à ce titre, donc, il a récemment assuré le co-commissariat de l'exposition Harald Zeman, le musée des obsessions, donc Harald Zeman Museum of Obsessions, qui avait été donc inauguré à Los Angeles en février 2018 et qui a ensuite également tourné en Europe dans 4 lieux différents, dont notamment Berne et Düsseldorf, si je ne me trompe. Il a donc par ailleurs assuré donc la publication du catalogue de cette très belle exposition et également la publication des écrits, d'un choix d'écrits de Zeman. Donc nous voilà effectivement lancés pour les archives de Harald Zeman en transit 2011-2019. Et je vous passe la parole. Merci.
Thank you for the introduction, and Thank you, Elita, and all the staff of the INSH for organizing this, and thanks everybody for being here. First of all, I'm really sorry I'm speaking in English today, but my French is horrible, so I guess I have no choice. I'm talking about the Zeman Archive, which is an archive that our institution, the Getty Research Institute, acquired in 2011. And yeah, basically from like a little biographical parenthesis, as it was said, I was working on this archive for my PhD back in Italy between 2007 and 2011. Then I got to Los Angeles as the subject expert of the team of archivists processing the papers, and later on I started working on the exhibition that just ended and the couple of publications. So on and off, this archive, it's been 10 years of my life, but it's been a very interesting journey to kind of work with the same material, first as a researcher, then as an archivist, and then with as a curator. The archive, at the time it got to the Getty Research Institute, the GRI, was actually the biggest collection our institution had ever acquired. It came together with its library, Zeman's personal library, which counts around 30,000 volumes, as you can see here. And of these 30,000 volumes, about, I believe, 60% were books that the Getty did not own already, which is kind of surprising because we have a pretty substantial library. And in terms of the personal papers, we are talking about 2,000 linear feet, which is, I think, about 600, 700 linear meters. It's now that everything is processed, it's close to 4,000 boxes and 450 flat files. So it's a collection completely out of scale. It's just massive, and it's not comparable to anything we received before. And in order to understand this, I think we have to get back a little bit to Zeman's biography and what happened in his life towards the end of the 60s, when he started systematically thinking about his archive. And I'm thinking about changes in his personal life as well as his professional life, and particularly his rebranding of himself as an independent curator, which is something I will talk about later. The archive was originally housed in this building, which Zeman called La Fabbrica Rosa, the Pink Factory. And it's a pink factory from the early 20th century in Maggia, in Canton Ticino, so in the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. Zeman's archive was on the first and second floor, and the ground floor is still the atelier, the studio of his widow, Ingeborg Luscher. So just a little very brief biographical context. Zeman was born in 1933 in Bern, Switzerland, from a Catholic family of Hungarian origin. His grandfather, who plays a pretty important role in his life, we will see, was an Hungarian immigrant that ended up, after a lot of travels around Europe, ended up in Switzerland in 1905 and settled there. Harald Zeman studied journalism, art history and archaeology at the local university in Bern and here in Paris, à la Sorbonne. And actually French culture plays a very important role in his intellectual upbringing and his overall understanding of art, I would say. In 1961, so pretty young, he was appointed to the curator of the Kunsthalle in Bern. Kunsthallen in German-speaking countries, as you know, are a non-collecting institution, showcasing mostly contemporary art. And here Zeman put up a pretty interesting program of exhibitions showcasing local artists, presenting also for the first time in Switzerland many international artists, but also presenting a series of exhibitions also about different aspects of visual cultures that particularly at that time would not find a place in a contemporary art museum, such as religious folk art, art brut, cinema and science fiction in particular. And here I brought only few images about his last show, which is one of the most studied of his, which is an exhibition in 1969 that was called When Attitudes Become Form. And it's considered, it's been historicized as one of the very first displays in a public museum in Europe of a series of trends in art of the late 60s that Zeman was interested in, such as concept art, land art, post-minimalism, and arte povera. The show was a great success internationally and in the press, but locally was quite a disaster and a scandal. And Zeman, after this exhibition, basically decided that the Kunsthalle was not a welcoming space anymore for his practice, and he decided to leave the institution. And from this moment onwards, he claimed to be an independent curator. He basically invented this figure of the independent curator, meaning a curator who does not work Monday to Friday for an institution, but who develops independently his or her projects and then at a later stage approaches an institution to host the exhibition. Here we can see some other pieces that were a huge scandal in Bern. This is Michael Heitzer destroying the sidewalk in front of the museum. So it's very interesting to understand how Zeman actually managed to make a living of this independent curator position. Actually, for a couple of years after stepping out of the museum, he did not have to think about it because he was appointed artistic director of Documenta in Kassel, the 5th edition that happened in 1972. So for a couple of years, he did have a paycheck from Kassel. And here I brought some images of Documenta 5 that again was a huge sprawling exhibition of the most recent trends in contemporary art, together with showcases dealing with different aspects of visual production in contemporary culture, such as advertisement, kitsch, again, a political propaganda, again, folk art, art brut, and so on. Here we have Joseph Beuys, Vito Conci, James Lee Byers, Paul Cotton. There was a very heavy like performance aspect in this Documenta for the very first time. Klaas Oldenburg, this is Zeman, the very last day of Documenta. So after Documenta followed a sort of a period of crisis, as apparently happened a lot with Documenta's artistic directors, and it's interesting to see how actually the exhibition that followed Documenta was an exhibition that Zeman set up in his own apartment in Bern, in the moment when he was actually leaving the city, because he was moving down to Ticino. And he was getting a divorce from his first wife, because during Documenta he met Ingeborg Luscher, this German artist who was already living in southern Switzerland, and so he decided to leave the city. So this is a big moment of change and insecurity, let's say, both in personal terms and in professional terms. This exhibition in the apartment was an exhibition devoted to his grandfather, the Hungarian immigrant, that happened to be a quite famous local hairdresser who invented a very primitive early method for perm, and was also a collector of prints and of coins and money. And so it's a very interesting, beside the domestic setting, it's a very interesting exhibition, because in a way we can see this really as a turning point in his practice, and it's really an exhibition somehow on like curating itself and on how to tell a story and how almost to bring back a life through the installation and the juxtaposition of objects. And then there's also another way of reading it, I think, as hairdressing as a sort of alternative history of modernity, with its own experimentations and discoveries and turning points. And here we get to the archive. So the archive and its massive scale is somehow born from this this moment of his career, in which he's confronted with how to actually present himself as an independent curator, and from the need of building a specific persona and a specific narrative around his own profession. Is also, I have to say, born from necessity, in the sense that Maggia is rather isolated and there's no main library nearby. So Zeman notoriously bought every single book he ever needed for his own research. And he was keeping all the meticulously keeping all the correspondence and all the gallery ephemera invitation that he would receive. And this is an object particularly interesting in terms of building his own narrative and his own persona. This is something Zeman called the travel sculpture. And it's basically a huge sort of Christmas tree looking sculpture that he assembled with all the luggage tags of his travels, that actually date back from 1969, 1970. Around that time he left the museum. Also, I have to say, what is interesting in this space is the fact that there's no division at all between personal life and professional life. From this moment onwards, Zeman has a team of collaborators which are close friends and some of his family members he would always work with for like the next 30 years. And this space is a space of work, but is also a space of conviviality, of like lunches and drinks and little naps. So there's really no division between the professional sphere and the personal sphere. A large part of the archive, the artist files, were actually housed in these boxes, which are boxes of a local red wine that he used to particularly like. So in some interviews he also said, the more I drink, the more I archive. So talking about this building up of a specific mythology around himself, I think is interesting to bring into the conversation also the concept of the Museum of Obsession, that was the title of our show. And it's a sort of conceptual framework that he built in the early 80s, around the time he's considering actually buying this building for his archive. The Museum of Obsession is a museum that does not exist, or rather that it existed only in his own mind. And from its inception onward, Zeman would consider every single exhibition and every single project of his as a temporary, limited representation of this museum that in its entirety cannot exist. But in a way, he also considered the archive as the most tangible part of this impossible, invisible museum. And actually, at the beginning, when he first writes about the Museum of Obsession, he was thinking about an exhibition project around this theme. And in his writing, he's particularly interested in mnemotechnics, and particularly in Giulio Camillo, the Renaissance philosopher, who wrote about the theater of memory in his essay, L'idea del teatro. And the theater of memory is interesting in understanding this archive in the sense that for Giulio Camillo, this theater is at the same time a device to order culture, a universal knowledge, but also it's a way to offer a symbolic representation of it. And also a device that would trigger encounters between different disciplines and different aspects of knowledge. And Zeman thinks about his archive exactly in this way. In some interviews, he talks about this archive as a divination device, or he talks about it as a garden in which he would stroll and pick flowers. And if you talk with some of his assistants, they say that this was actually the way he was working on his exhibitions. Like, the geography of this space was really important in the sense that he would walk around, and the archive itself somehow apparently would throw ideas back at him. So in thinking about the archive, for Zeman was really important that all of it would be open shelves and all the material would be easily reachable by hands. And this is clear. This became very clear when we talked with Christoph Zurcher, who's a local architect there in Ticino, and he was the architect of all of Zeman's exhibition from the late 70s onwards. And in the late 70s, Christoph was also designing their house, Harald Zeman's house, and at the beginning, they were thinking about having the archive inside the house, but the only way to do it was through a system of drawers and flat file drawers, of course, because at that time already the material was just too much. And Zeman refused that idea. And finally, later on in the mid-80s, he found this factory in which he could basically stage all this material exactly in the way he wanted it. I should point out that this is basically material that grew out of his research and his correspondence. It's not, Zeman was not really a collector of art. There were only two aspects of cultures in which he played like really a role of an avid collector. One was the history of Monte Verità. Monte Verità, as you might know, is a hill close to Locarno in which, well, it's a very long history, but basically for 100 years, a series of different attempts to reform society took place in Monte Verità. And it's mostly famous because in 1900, the very first community of naturists and vegetarians was founded there on the site. And Zeman worked on a very big exhibition about the history of Monte Verità that opened in 1978. And another aspect of culture that he was actively collecting was pataphysics and everything that had to do with Alfred Jarry. And this is very interesting because in a way we can see this idea of the archive and of the Museum of Obsessions itself as a sort of delirious pataphysical concepts, right? Of an institution that does not exist except as in an intellectual cerebral level. I should also point out that the part of the archive that has to do more closely with the history of Monte Verità, Zeman always wanted it to remain in Canton Ticino, and actually he himself made a deal to Fondazione Monte Verità, which is the foundation that administers the site, which bought that part of the archive, which is now in deposit in Biblioteca Cantonale di Bellinzona, the local library. And that's about 5% of his archive. So the archive is actually split between these two institutions. So now getting to some more like technical talk about what we did and how we approached such a massive amount of documents. First of all, the most important thing was to try to retain this this geography of the archive and how the archive was working in Ticino. And a very smart idea that my colleagues who were packing the archive back in Ticino had, I think, was to visually divide the boxes and the archive in the moment of packing into series already. I mean, traditionally, we work towards an inventory of an archive, then the archive is packed and come to the institution, and then the archive who's assigned to the archive, by looking at the inventory and looking at the boxes, decide the different series the archive has to be divided into. That work was done already in Ticino, and all the boxes were color-coded with some stickers that identify the different series, which were housed in different parts of the archive and were also ordered in different ways. So, for example, the artist files were ordered alphabetically by name of the artist, whereas the project files were ordered chronologically, whereas the ephemera were ordered alphabetically by name of the town where the museum of the gallery is. So since the archive was so massive and it was impossible to bring everything to the Getty Research Institute, and part of it had to be housed off-site in another warehouse that we had, having this color-coded system that helped us identify the different series just by looking at the shelves was really, really important. Also, all the archive was meticulously filmed in Ticino before the packing. So basically we have hours and hours of video in which every single shelf has been filmed. So it's possible also to reconstruct the position of the books and the relationship within the different shelves. For the first time also we had to build a team of archivists. Usually one archivist is assigned one archive and work on that archive from start to finish. This time the archive was so big, and also the pressure to get it processed fast was so huge that we decided to work in a team. And so I joined as I did not have any library science training before, and I joined as the subject expert in the team of archivists who knew what they were doing. Also, and this was made possible also, I should say, by a grant that we get from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Another thing that was tasted for the first time with this archive was the fact that we did not wait to process everything before opening it up to researchers, but as soon as we finished processing a series, we decided to open it up to the research community. And that had been very much appreciated by the researchers that started coming basically just 1 year after the acquisition of the archive. A challenging aspect of bringing this archive to the Getty Research Institute has been the close connection that the library and the papers had in the original archive in Maggia, of course, that was not possible to physically retain in our institute. So what we did was basically for the 30,000 volumes in the library, each volume got a specific note in the MARC record, in the library record, which reads Harald Zeman collection. So now it's possible to search our website for Harald Zeman collection, and you would get 30,000 results, which are all the books in his library. And it's also possible to search, for example, Mario Merz Harald Zeman collection, and so you would get all the books on Mario Merz that Zeman owned. But also another challenging aspect of it was that the artist files particularly had a lot of books, smaller books inside of them. So in this case, what we decided to do is to photocopy the cover of the book, keep a photocopy inside the archive, inside the artist file, and then move the book into the library. So the book now is searchable and can be found by people who are not doing research specifically on the Zeman papers. We acquired also his personal computer, his hard drive. And only recently we have actually at the GRI an archivist working only on digital born material, and eventually in the future the idea is that all the digital born files that we acquire will be ingested in our digital repository, as all the photographs or the videos are. We are not there yet, so in order to make Zeman's email accessible to researcher, what we did is that basically his Outlook was moved into a laptop that cannot connect to the internet, and it's all the Outlook is reading only, basically. So the researchers can come and can request that laptop as they would request a box in the archive. The laptop is brought up in the reading room, and they can search and navigate Harald Zeman's Outlook, Harald Zeman's email. I should also mention, coming back to some of the discussion we had yesterday, that in terms of the finding aid that we created, not all the series are described in the same way, like the level of granularity varies. So for example, for the artist files, we have files for more than 24,000 artists, and we thought it was necessary and really, really important to list all of them. Whereas, for example, for the topical files, we did not list all the topics. It's only box level. So you have, for example, box 10 Alps to, I don't know, Bosphorus or something. And if you are wondering whether Zeman had a file on Berenson, I don't know, you have to get the box Alps to Bosphorus. This was decided for a matter of time, of course, but we can also go back actually and work on a more finer level of granularity eventually, and this is something we already had been done in the past for Zeman, getting feedbacks from researchers. Okay, now I very fast move to our exhibition and what we have been done with the archive. So as I said at the beginning, we were really interested in this exhibition about the grandfather because we think it's really a crucial node in his practice and in his life. And there's also the particular situation that most of the objects in these exhibitions are actually objects that Zeman inherited from his grandfather and then got in the archive. And also we have this huge corpus of photographs by Balthasar Burkhardt. So the exhibition is really, really well documented. And so we decided to work towards a reconstruction of this exhibition that proved to be a very rewarding but complex and challenging enterprise. So first of all, we analyzed all the photographs and we tried to understand which item we owned and which items were missing, as you can see in these files. And then what to do with the missing items? Well, these are our conservators working on some of the items that ended up in the show. Also for the conservator, it had been an interesting challenge actually, because these are for the most part items from the early 20th century that were shown in the 70s and then had been sitting in the archive for 40 years. So the challenge that the conservators were faced with was to bring back the object not to a pristine condition of early 20th century, but to a condition similar to the one the object was when it was shown by Zeman in 1974. And this is an example of this mannequin that came to us with wide open eyes, but actually by studying the pictures we realized that in 1974 his eyes were closed. So maybe it was Zeman's kids or someone else who drew the eyes on the mannequin, and so our restorers closed her eyes again. We had some of the furniture. We did not have all of them. The good thing about being in Los Angeles is that we have amazing crafts of this kind in Hollywood and in the movie industry. So we worked with some people from Hollywood to reconstruct some of the furniture. So for example, we had one of these armoire, but we did not have the other one. So a copy was made, same thing with the bed. Some of the items that were missing, we found them on Amazon or on eBay. We're not talking about artworks, we're talking about like everyday objects that were in the grandfather's house. and some we commissioned and we managed to reconstruct. So for example, we have this beautiful mannequin with the wig and with this boat on top. We did have the mannequin, we did have the boat, we were missing the wig and we were missing the blue drape. So we worked with a wig artist working in theater and opera houses to reconstruct the wig. Sorry, I'm going very fast because I think I'm already out of time. Another funny example is Harald Zeman's grandmother's stuffed chihuahua, which was lost. So we managed to basically 3D print the chihuahua and then work with a taxidermist who covered it with dog skin, and here it is. So it was a very challenging and inspiring project to try to figure out how to get all these objects. And basically this is in Los Angeles, where we reconstruct the entire apartment as basically a sculpture that people could walk inside. And in Bern, actually, we managed to install the exhibition in the actual apartment where Zeman was living in the 70s. And here are just few images of the other part of the exhibition, that was the Museum of Obsession part, which was a more kind of retrospective exhibition about his whole life and practice, that we divided into sections that were thematic sections, but that were also running somehow chronologically through his life. So there was a first part that was called Avant-Garde, which was about Zeman's relation with the, like the artists of his own generation. So these artists from When Artists to Become Form and Documenta 5, mostly. Then there was a part called Utopias and Visionaries, which is about another very interesting phase of Zeman's career, roughly between the mid-70s and the mid-80s, in which Zeman works towards more historic exhibitions, looking back at early 20th century, and Monte Verita that I mentioned is part of this exhibitions. And then there was a last section called Geographies, which was focused on Zeman in the 90s, when he works towards a series of national shows, like an exhibition about art in Switzerland, one about Austria, one about Belgium. So how to tell the history and the visual tradition of a people in an exhibition, but also geographies, because at that time Zeman becomes maybe the first like jet set globetrotter curator who's called like each single year to curate a biennale in a different continent. So we were very interested in trying to tackle this dichotomy between his local interests and his big global outreach. And we did publish 2 books. We published a catalog for which we commissioned many original essays, and also, since Zeman is much more known in Europe and has written for the most part in German, we also decided to publish with our in-house GRI publishing house, publishing department, an anthology of his writings. So we decided to republish 2 anthologies that he himself curated, actually, about his writings. He published one in 81 and one in 85, and then we worked on a third section that was a selection of his writings from 85 up to his passing in 2005. So I guess I'm already out of time, so that's it. Thank you.
Bon, nous avons le temps pour quelques petites questions. Donc pour ma part, ce que j'ai trouvé très très saisissant entre vos 2 présentations, c'était effectivement de voir de quelle manière aussi comment dirais-je, tout le processus de penser activement l'archive forme une véritable posture qui participe d'une certaine volonté aussi de mythifier l'auteur de l'archive, de se créer un personnage et voire même, donc à partir de là, donc ce n'est pas seulement une méthode de travail, mais on dirait presque un mode de vie qui transparaît et qui surtout, donc dans vos deux expériences, montre aussi ce passage, cette transition des archives, effectivement ensuite de leur mise en espace à travers des projets d'exposition qui montrent à quel point l'exposition participe aussi finalement de tout ce travail d'érudition et épistémologique sur l'archive. Donc seulement pour moi ce qui était intéressant, c'était de voir comment Zeman d'un côté a besoin de se déplacer physiquement dans l'espace pour épuiser les idées et pour faire travailler l'archive. Et de l'autre côté, pour Sigelob, il y a une sorte de mise à plat. C'est-à-dire que le lieu entre dans des espaces bidimensionnels et qu'effectivement là, il y a un mouvement comme ça un peu opposé entre ces deux cas, donc que j'ai trouvé très intéressant. Mais je passe donc les questions donc, à la salle. Oui, voilà.
C'est une question et peut-être une remarque. Je vais essayer peut-être de vous l'adresser en anglais. It's about Zeman, and I was very interested by your exhibition because I think it's a nice way to show how it's how to say that. With your exhibition, you reconstructed an exhibition. And Zeman was perhaps one of the first with Pontus Sultan to reconstruct works to show them in exhibition. I think to Les Machines Célibataires, for example, where he reconstructed works or constructed works of Kafka and so on, which never existed. And I think it's there is a circulation between his way to do, and I think it's quite nice for him to see that he is reconstructed yet now in his time. So, and I think the question of the reconstruction of exhibition is of course very interesting and very important nowadays. There was a reconstruction of when attitudes become forms, but you choose this one, which is I think, yes, it's a time where he was very interested in reconstruction in itself. And my question was also because Zeman worked a lot with Peter Bisseger, and I met him once, but and he has at home still all the maquettes and so on. He made four. For Zeman, I don't know if you have contact with him, if he's still living, I don't know, but it would be nice to also to keep these objects together, I don't know. So.
Yeah, yeah, Peter is still alive and doing well, and we visited him in Ticino, yeah, also the family has a lot of these models and maquettes that Zeman was commissioning to Bisseger and others for the shows. And yeah, that's a good point. I mean, particularly since the Bachelor Machines and like the mid-70s, that becomes a characteristic of his shows, which is very, very important. And yeah, and the family also have some. And yeah, we've been talking about eventually getting them and conserve them together with the archive. Of course, getting a lot of large-scale models and maquettes, it's really challenging for every institution because, you know, it's not only storage, but then also a matter of how you make them accessible to researchers, you know. We cannot possibly drag like a huge model inside a reading room. So, yeah, it's important to keep them, but then what's the point of keeping them if you cannot show them? And so, but yeah, we are discussing this possibility, and it's yeah, it's also interesting to think about the models. I think in relation to this idea of the museum of obsession, because for Zeman was really a way to bring inside the museum space, like entire sites, right, that he couldn't bring otherwise, like for example the model of Monte Verità or the model of the Vittoriale by D'Annunzio. So it was a way, really a way for him, a strategy for him to open up the exhibition beyond the museum walls. Yeah.
D'autres questions?
Merci tous les deux pour ces présentations qui effectivement nous montrent encore une fois à quel point les archives curatoriales prennent de plus en plus d'importance dans la recherche aussi auprès des institutions. J'ai une question pour toi, Sarah. Je ne sais pas si tu en as parlé, si tu l'as mentionné, peut-être je n'ai pas compris, mais est-ce que les archives, où est-ce qu'ils se trouvent les archives de Sigelaub aujourd'hui, et parce que je sais qu'ils sont au MoMA. Est-ce que tu peux élaborer sur ça? Et aussi, si tu peux, si tu en as fait partie, si tu es au courant de ça, élaborer sur comment ces archives ont été du coup intégrées par l'institution. Quel type de passage a eu lieu entre les archives donc privées des Sigelaub aux archives de l'institution? Merci.
Alors oui, en effet, j'en ai pas parlé. Donc en fait, il y a trois, en fonction en fait des trois sphères d'activité de Sigelaub, trois fonds différents. Donc en ce qui concerne le marxisme et les médias, donc c'est la première grande opération archivistique de Sigelaub qui fait en 91, donc seulement quelques années après avoir fermé son IMMRC, c'est-à-dire qu'en fait il va donner son fonds de livres et de documents à une bibliothèque à Amsterdam spécialisée sur l'histoire sociale. Donc ça s'appelle l'International Institute for Social History, qui est un lieu absolument incroyable à Amsterdam. Et donc il s'est trouvé qu'au même moment il déménageait à Amsterdam. Donc là il y avait donc cette première opération archivistique, et la condition du don était que l'institution inventorie l'archive. Donc là, ça s'est fait de manière très classique, sauf que, de manière classique, ils ont séparé les livres de la documentation qu'ils ont considéré comme de l'archive. Donc dans l'exposition, en fait, moi j'ai fait tout un travail pour recroiser l'ensemble et donc avoir une espèce de base de données qui représente la totalité, voilà, dans un même inventaire. Deuxième opération archivistique, elle se conclut beaucoup plus tard, donc en 2010, mais Sigelaub commence à y travailler dès 90, et elle concerne les archives, donc ces papiers de l'art conceptuel qu'il avait, donc comme je l'ai expliqué, en 72 quand il quitte le monde de l'art, qu'il avait mis à droite à gauche chez ses amis artistes, et notamment tous ces papiers qui étaient conservés dans la cave de Robert Barry, qui est un artiste conceptuel. Et donc dans les années 90, il cherche un lieu pour ses archives, il a plein d'idées de projets plus ou moins farfelus, de diffuser ses archives par photocopie, de créer des centres de documentation sur l'art conceptuel, etc. Mais le deal donc, se conclut en 2010-2011 avec le MoMA, et fait partie d'une plus grande opération qui est la vente de sa collection, enfin d'une partie de sa collection, les œuvres les plus importantes de sa collection au MoMA, et il donne en même temps les archives. Donc là, les archives intègrent le département archives du MoMA dans une configuration extrêmement classique. Voilà. Et la dernière opération archivistique qui finalement l'a occupé dans les années 2000, mais il n'a jamais réussi à la faire aboutir, il voulait donner toujours donc sa bibliothèque sur les textiles et ces textiles à un musée, mais il n'a jamais vraiment trouvé voilà, la possibilité vraiment de le faire idéal pour lui, et ça s'est réalisé donc après sa mort sous la forme d'un prêt donc au musée de Leyde. Et il y a une dernière part des archives qui se dirait c'est plutôt les fonds de tiroir qui sont encore dans la possession de sa fondation, donc la Stichting Ingress Foundation, donc gérée par son estate. Voilà.
Une dernière question.
Oui, merci. Merci infiniment à tous les deux. Peut-être une question commune, mais qui s'adresse en premier lieu à Sarah, mais peut-être qu'elle est aussi valable pour Pietro. Dans quelle mesure le travail que vous avez fait de recontextualisation lors de l'exposition dont vous avez parlé et que vous avez montré et qui a l'air extrêmement cohérent, qui non seulement met ensemble ces trois domaines séparés mais pense des liens, et puis ne serait-ce qu'à l'intérieur de chaque fond essaye de reconditionner et de recréer des liens, à part les photographies, éventuellement le catalogue, est-ce qu'il y a une rétroaction sur les institutions qui conservent, ou est-ce que c'est des choses complètement différentes? Est-ce qu'il y a eu un effet de cette exposition que vous avez faite sur les lieux qui gardent les archives? Et c'est peut-être la même question pour Pietro. Did the exhibition has a retroactive effect on the methods of thinking about the archive, or was it just an extension? Mais d'abord dans le cas de Sigela.
Alors, c'est une question vraiment intéressante. En fait, l'exposition a déjà dévoilé des archives quasiment inédites, en fait, puisque le fond conceptuel venait d'intégrer le MoMA, donc n'avait pas encore été vraiment consulté par les chercheurs, ou en tout cas, il y avait eu très peu de publications là-dessus. Et le fond marxiste et le fond textile n'avaient jamais n'avait jamais vraiment été montré, sauf une part des textiles en 2012 lors d'une première exposition à Londres où j'avais été également co-commissaire. Donc le premier effet, ça a été de montrer ces choses inédites. Ensuite, les effets... en fait, comme il y avait beaucoup d'éléments pour l'exposition, les institutions ont dû beaucoup travailler pour rendre ces demandes de prêt possible, puisqu'en fait on est sur 1500 éléments en tout dans l'exposition, et c'est l'exposition du Stedelijk Museum où il y a eu le plus d'objets dans une exposition, donc ça c'est déjà un petit record. Donc eux ont beaucoup travaillé sur les collections pour les rendre disponibles au prêt, et après je pense que ça a attiré des gens ensuite pour aller consulter ces collections. Alors au MoMA, il y avait déjà, je pense, un public possible, mais sur la collection marxiste, ça a attiré pas mal de chercheurs. Ensuite, je sais que le MoMA a été très intéressé par la manière dont on avait montré les choses et qu'est-ce qu'on avait fait des collections. Voilà. Et ensuite, ça a déclenché sur le musée de Leyde la prise en dépôt du fonds textile. Parce que... Ça va un peu sur le classement, sur les opérations de... Non, pas sur le... Bah non, puisqu'en fait les inventaires étaient faits. Non, il n'y a pas eu d'effet là-dessus d'un point de vue archivistique pur.
Well, in terms of processing and archiving, now that the show is over, we are reprocessing the whole section about the grandfather, because all the research for the show made clear what was actually in the show and what was not in the show, because Zeman got all the stuff from his grandfather's house, but of course the exhibition was a recreation of that space. So a lot of the material that we have in the archive and that looked like grandfather material we discovered was not actually in the exhibition. So, and we were running out of time, so we at a certain point we just stopped processing the grandfather items and decided it would have made more sense to process the whole thing once the exhibition was over. So that's the only like technical repercussion in the archive. I guess it was interesting to work on the exhibition also because you have to do a totally different work in the sense that it's about like relevance from an art historical point of view, but it's also about finding items that are visually appealing, you know. So there are several parts of the career of Zeman that we decided not to tackle in the show because we thought they would have not been particularly interesting visually, starting from the material we have in the archive. But then this idea of Zeman being an independent curator was also really like a fantasy that he played with, but actually he was collaborating for Kunsthaus Zurich for more than 20 years, I should point out. So there's the Kunsthalle in Bern and there's the Kunsthaus in Zurich that also have plenty of materials with Zeman, not to mention the library in Bellinzona that I mentioned before. So also all this research that we have done for the show also brought to light all these other archival holdings in all these different institutions. So there's a lot of work to be done also in terms of collaborating and maybe thinking about digital projects that we can do together in order to put together the different collections.
Merci beaucoup. S'il n'y a pas de questions brûlantes, il y a encore la discussion finale aussi en fin de journée et nous avons une petite pause.